competition, and other. And that's why we need to compare the technologies, cloud concepts. For example, the latest interesting concept of cloud technology is web service in Facebook, Cloud Girlfriend. You can create a virtual, joyous, beautiful girlfriend which will write you a comment, and you will be the best man. And this is also idea of cloud. And that's why we need any idea how to determine, to restrict the concept of cloud. And we should ask the science of linguistics and semantics says that we need we have a lot of words with wide semantics. And that's why the cloud has current condition, current restriction in one domain. In the IT security it's one semantics, in other domains it's another semantics. And I think that in security cloud is very important technology, because virus is cloud technology, modern virus, and that's why we need to create anti-cloud technologies. And for addition, anti-cloud. And I think to addition for report we can discuss the idea of cloud brand model. It will be some kind of website from which we can enter to internet, to other technologies, web services. And this portal, this brand model can be updated by regularly, and it's another idea instead of reset. Well, I think we will try to discuss that in it.
Cloud. It's very interesting. For me, I'm looking at it in a totally different angle. I put my investigator's hat on. And any agencies, it's a nightmare to have any investigation within a cloud, because there are no owners. So if there is an investigation, there is nothing we can do. There is nobody we can prosecute. And cloud is causing really a lot of problems for investigators, data recovery and so on. While for cyber criminals it's opened up new opportunities. Now, in terms of virus detection and so on, antivirus within cloud, it's very interesting that few seconds of window, empty window that vacuum that you were talking about is quite crucial. And perhaps hybrid is a solution. We can only wait and see what happens in time. But although cloud is a very good platform, if I could call it, or a network, or whatever you want to call it, the technology you want to call it, it saves industry a lot of money. But it is very, very dangerous, because the data is out there, anybody can capture it. And the governance of those data is important. At the moment there are no standardization. So there is, everybody just come up with a package and say, this is my cloud, and there is no standardization, and there is no control over what goes into the cloud and how you set up that cloud. And perhaps, rather than looking at it from this side, perhaps we need to go back to the root of the problem and try to see whether we can secure the providers of this cloud. If you secure those people, then hopefully that will reflect back into the frontline society. That's
But in terms of the cloud, I think one of the fundamental issues there is this point of trust and the attitude that it engenders on the part of particularly the potential clients, and how they view the opportunity to use the cloud versus their requirement for security. So I think if you look at some of the surveys that are already around, there's quite a lot of evidence of organisations being willing to send their services to external hosting to have it out there, but then significantly less consideration about the requirement to secure it. So, for example, recent survey in the UK suggesting something like almost half of the organisations responding suggesting that they had critical data hosted externally out there in the network, but only 17% or so had actually given any consideration to even looking about whether those external hosting organisations were encrypting that data. So it's this battle, as usual, I think, with new technology and new opportunities to ensure that security is actually there on the radar and that people are taking notice of the fact that they need to protect something, as well as the opportunity to reduce the cost, increase the convenience of the deployment, for example.
Well, actually, the most interesting aspect of cloud that I see is the fact that people still think they have a choice whether they want to use the cloud or not. And maybe they still have, kind of, at this moment, but the choice will go away during the years. And I'm not speaking only about security. I mean, of course, you can say you don't want to use security products with cloud, but of course this means less protection. But I'm more speaking of software. So, right now, if you want to use like Office applications or Adobe Photoshop, you have to buy it or you have to pirate it. There are those two options. In either case, you have some software that you will install. And of course, the future will look a bit different because right now a lot of companies are experimenting with offering their software in the cloud. So imagine that Adobe would finally get to a point where they could offer the same quality of their products, of Adobe Photoshop or maybe some program that needs less memory in the cloud and not on your computer. So why should they still sell it in the stores? They would have more revenues if they directly sell it. They wouldn't have a problem with privacy. And so of course there will always be software that needs to be run locally, and especially companies who program their own software wouldn't want to give everything to the cloud. But when it comes to multimedia software and to games and to small applications, more or less everything will move to the cloud. And so in a couple of years you will only have a thin client for most of the things that you do, and the software that you will run on some virtual place. And there won't be any choice, your software will be in the cloud, and this means your data will be as well.
My point of view of the cloud is that I've been focusing on the infrastructure, virtualization, how to secure the content that's actually published into the cloud, and how you as a user can make sure that the content that you receive is also secure. I don't want to speak too much, I want to get into the panel discussion, so that's about it.
David, could you think that cloud infrastructure is secure?
Not at the moment, no.
Well, last year I went to Southeast Asia and had a number of presentations there. We were also discussing security, and the interesting thing was at that time, this was like the 10th anniversary of the Love Letter War. And actually I remember when the Love Letter War appeared. At that time everyone was using email and not thinking about security. Everyone was assuring that email and security has nothing to do with each other. Suddenly all those companies were infected by the Love Letter War and couldn't work for 1 or 2 days. And then Microsoft had to implement something in the programs that attachments wouldn't automatically be executed or displayed. So suddenly people understood, oh, it's nice technology, but it's also dangerous. And I think that we will see the same with cloud, so that right now people are very cautious. Then when they see it works well, it will go the other way, so they will be very enthusiastic about it. And then we will have something like the Love Letter in the cloud, like deep effect, where suddenly people will start to understand, okay, maybe it's the best to have some kind of hybrid solution, so to have backup solutions, because if everything's on the internet in the cloud and your internet doesn't work, what are you going to do?
Love Letter was a perfect example of social engineering. Everybody wants to know who loves him. If you look at the history of the security industry, 20-25 years ago, we protect personal computers. Then a lot of servers appeared and became an era of internet. And we start to protect servers. Now we protect cloud infrastructure. That's true. It's basically the same. Computer, or computer. But on the other hand, 20 years ago we protect executable files. Currently we protect data. Not the files itself, but data. So what's the main risk for corporations nowadays? Data leakage. What's the main risk for mobile devices? Physical loss of devices and data leakage. So we have to put all of our attention to data protection, not the file protection. So if we look at the problem from this angle, we could see that paradigm has changed. So definitely
protection of the cloud is the same like 20 years ago, to some extent, definitely. But if we look at it, what we protect not executables, we protect data, regardless of the type, regardless of the format. It's non-structural like a PE file, it could be, PDF or whatever, or doc file, or some thoughts of a crazy person, but nevertheless it's data. That's a problem on one hand, and that's a challenging task on another hand. And I think we could solve it.
Can I just say something? Actually, do we really understand what cloud is? Because I think you may also make a mistake between cloud and server providers. Okay? Cloud, there are only a handful of organizations out there with clouds. Okay? So, do we really understand what cloud is? Does everybody know what cloud is? Because I think that's a crucial point at this point.
It's like a client-server architecture which appeared in the market 20-25 years ago, on one hand. But on another hand, it's a dramatic change.
I think the main reason, the difference between cloud and client-server technology, that quantity of services is growing very high. And that's why we have a situation when the quantity becomes transformed to quality. And we need new quality technology. It's impossible to create antivirus technology for all step services. It's impossible because there are thousands. That's why we need a new technology, new concept to control malware and some other programs. That's why we need to create two possible abilities. First is to create something cloud security certificate. Every service needs a certificate. Another variant is to create a special standard for security AP, application program interface. Every service, every program should have a future special interface for connection special programs, antivirus and spam programs. That's why with two ways, and this is new technology. And that's why we can solve this problem with 3 programs, with 10, 100, but with million programs it's possible. I think this is the difference between cloud and cloud. Later cloud and future cloud.
I think the point there is true. It's the volume of the opportunity that's now there for organisations. So they actually have the opportunity now to take a lot more of the things that they were previously providing in-house and invested in capital equipment and actually offload that out to a cloud provider. So their actual cost options change from capital expenditure through to a more operating cost model. And so that's the fundamental thing. It's the change in how that makes the business operate. And I'm just picking up on another point there was mentioned about certificates for services. I think there's also probably a wider need for certification of service providers, so the cloud providers, to have actually some standard against which they're certified, so that potential clients have this upfront assertion that they're operating to a certain level of security and they have certain practices in place.
And also I think it's important that we touched upon new technology here. We should learn from the mistakes that we've had in the past and pick up on those and improve, evolve, and actually try to come up with softwares that are more secure, because the biggest problem we have is actually the softwares themselves, because there are so much holes in them, there are so many backdoors in them. So if we start having secure softwares, then everything else will be safe. And that's really where the new technology, this is where I think you as a new, as a future generation needs to start thinking about, learn from the mistakes that we have, move on with the new technology, try to improve it. Of course, criminals are always one step ahead of everybody else, but it's a cat and mouse, isn't it, the race? So we have to be out there with them, and I'm sure we can beat them in no time.
And one aspect that cloud will also have an impact on will be software patents, by the way. Because right now, when you have software patents, in most cases it's because you want to sell a software just to your customer, you want to make sure that your competitors don't copy this technology. So you have a patent on it, and every competitor copies your technology. Maybe you can prove it only by reversing something, but more or less it's possible to find it out. And if everything of the software is running on the cloud, how can you really find out if, for example, a competitor is stealing your technology in his product if his product is only available in the cloud? If you can't see it on the user interface, if it's only hidden in some algorithms, how do you want to prove it?
I actually understand your question when you say that the cloud is not new technology, because at the moment, if you look on the cloud services that we have out there, Amazon and whatnot, it's basically just a combination of hosted service with virtualization. That's about it. That's what we have today. But why say that that is the cloud? The cloud can evolve to something much better, and that's why we're having this panel discussion now to see what can we do to change the concept of the cloud to make it more secure. Because I actually don't agree with what you just said, that it's all about vulnerabilities. I think about that it's about usability as well. And you can prevent some of the easy mistakes that the users do today, because all the responsibility is locally on the computers today. If you can put some of that responsibility out there to some intelligent agent that can control the user's usability, then you can also prevent some of the stupid mistakes that the users do today. Clicking links and opening files and whatnot.
Doing that means you actually you're controlling the users. So in a way, we are moving more and more away from this borderless society that internet has created, and we wanted it anyway. And this is why everybody is sort of resisting to have governance on internet. So in a way, on one hand, yes, the intelligent, the codes can actually override some of the problems, but at the same time, it would be, I think, controlling people, and I think we would have difficulty selling it to users.
But we have those rules today locally on the computers. I just think that we're going to put those rules in the cloud.
For sure, because usability has nothing to do with the cloud. It's just you can use the cloud in a browser, or you can have your own completely different user interface. And currently, for example, there are experiments running, successful experiments in the United States, where it's tested if it's possible to play computer games over the cloud. And it seems that if within a distance from 300 kilometers to the central server, it's possible that you can play even action games with low latency in a very high graphic quality and sound quality, so you will not really notice the difference. In fact, it's even better for the gamer. The gamer has a weak machine, but the graphic he sees on screen is graphics provided by several graphic cards running at maximum power. And if he wants to have even more, he just has to pull a slider, and suddenly he has an even better computer. So, it has not really something to do necessarily with the browser. The browser could disappear in the background, and then it's the application that counts. And for the user, it's perfect, because how does it work? If you're not a computer expert, usually people buy their computer or order it, and then they ask someone that they know to say, can you please help me setting up my computer, installing the programs, and this thing repeats every 1 or 2 years. Now, if you just have the thin client model, and if it really works, if the infrastructure is there, then you just have everything there, and you don't have to reinstall things. You don't have to care about compatibility of stuff, because this is all done by the cloud provider. You're just using your machine and don't care about the details.
I suppose there is a potential risk in that respect, and taking that point and back to what David said about things that could be done for the user in the cloud. If more and more is happening on their behalf transparently, and they're having to think less about security, then in the context when they're not operating through the cloud, so when they're using devices directly, when there are more local security decisions to be made, then they might find themselves having had less exposure to it and being in less of a position to make an informed, experienced decision about it. So I think there's that balance to be struck again about how much you take away and make completely transparent to them, and how much you put it there, make them see it, but make it easy for them.
What you would see in toaster all the way down to driving your car to points that you want to go, so you would just direct it, and that would be the future. And I guess that's where issues will come up in future, and you have to think about it, because I don't think we have the capability or the technology to create the future technology as yet. And once Intel comes up with those technologies, because sometimes you are cornered and there's nothing else you can do until you have the machinery to create the future technology. So I think that's what's going to happen in about 10 years, 15, 20 years time. I think by 2020, 2030, you have a totally different concept of,
Sorry, what I meant was not the toaster requiring the services of the cloud, but the toaster being part of the cloud and providing services.
It would be part of the cloud. That's what I'm trying to say. It would be part of the cloud. It would be part of your I give you one simple example. The cars of today, you walk into a car, the door opens up because it's a keyless entry. You walk into a car, it recognizes you, it starts looking at your devices, matches up, pairs up, does everything that you want to do, and if there are three of you, it will separate out who's sitting in the car. That's now. And I hate to think that, because there are some cars out there that actually control the braking, the gap between the two, and imagine what happens if there is a virus there. And don't forget, we've had few air accidents, including viruses into the systems. So there has been one, recently in Spain. So I'm not going to open up that, but there are viruses within the system. Actually, the mechanical part, it infiltrated within the system through a USB stick. So,
I think to take your point directly, when you're saying about the cloud coming down to, if you like, an individual user's PC at home, I think that all comes down to what you're willing to trust. Because if you're talking about a cloud service provider, as I mentioned earlier, being certified as meeting a certain standard of security within their infrastructure, it would be much more difficult for them to be able to guarantee that if they're utilising technologies that are physically distributed that they don't have overall control over. So there might be something they could do to do, if you like, a baseline assessment of technologies they might want to rope in. But I think it's a very different model to a full, if you like, set up cloud service provider with a wholly owned infrastructure of their own.
I would like to add that, yes, I also think it's more unlikely that, your netbook will become a host in the cloud, but I think in 15, 20 years it would probably not be unusual if you go to a house where there are 20, 30 families living, that in the basement there will be one big node, one big machine that's taking care of that, and that's controlled by some professional company, and that also serves as a kind of backup service. So even if normally the cloud services will be hosted 100 kilometers away, that is not available, then a thing in the cellar will help out, something like that.
And as for me, I don't believe in cloud future at all, and I don't want to believe it in, because I think the future for personal information systems, and that's mean that the future will create by every of you, and every man will create its own information system, and that it's possible to integrate in one or second or few clouds, and it's possible. That's why I think we will have a new wave, and we will think about anti-cloud technology. And one idea, one great economist said that if you don't know what's the difference between technology, try to think about money. What's the difference with cloud technology? Money. We try to use another scheme for payments. We need to pay a little bit, but a lot of us. And that's why the main question of cloud security, who should pay for security? User or service provider? And this is the main question. If we all speak, I think the cloud technology for service should pay service provider. That's why we need to pay for separate service, security service. It should be integrated in web services, all web services. We shouldn't think about it.
That's actually, I think that's a good idea, because for a company who set the trend or set the standard, opens a lot of opportunities from economical point of view, from customers' point of view. So, what's the power of Intel or Microsoft? They set the standard. And that's why I think you're right, it's high time to think about standardization, especially because we are a pretty powerful company in the industry. Yes, you're right, I think it's high time. And on the other hand, it's high time from point of view of that the number of in the cloud services grow very rapidly. And most of them, I agree with David, most of them are not protected. Or because cloud providers even don't think about security. It looks like that we don't have any 20 years of history of some threats or internet threats. And they believe that cloud infrastructure is something different. That's not true.
Cloud came about because you want to get rid of duplication of services. For example, organizations are using Gmail as a way of reducing the burden of using other facilities like other mails. And the more duplications you have, the more security nightmares you have. Okay? And that was the whole idea. Now, what organizations are not doing, they're going one step further than that. Now they want actually get rid of the servers too, so that they have a data bank of all of this information. And this is where I think one size doesn't fit everybody. And you need different responsibilities and different organizations. Perhaps you need a cloud for banks, perhaps you need a cloud for societies and so on. And those will look at the certifications of individuals. And you're absolutely correct. Any system needs defined boundaries, and once you've got the boundaries and once you have the stakeholders within that system identified, then I think you won't have any problems. But organizations are trying to save money if they could, and really IT is a bottomless pit. There is, you can put so much money into IT services, and yet you have not even achieved the starting point. So, because it's a moving goal. It's, every day you have something new coming to the systems, and that's where the cloud comes in very handy, because if you change one center, then you actually manage to do it for everybody else.
Yeah, but also everybody else can be a valuable customer, because we are having that problem today. I might have a blog about pink ponies somewhere in the cloud, and you might have a corporate website in the same cloud, and if someone attacks my pink pony blog, they can potentially get access to your software as well. So that's something that we need to have in mind, that the infrastructure of the cloud is extremely important.
And I'd like to add that probably, as we saw, that the cloud, the definition is very hard, and it's probably the reason why so many people hate the cloud. It's similar to multimedia. When multimedia was a big word, I really hated it at that time, because it was clearly that multimedia was the favorite word of marketing people. But now, if we look back, of course, multimedia changed everything. And the problem at that time was that multimedia, it was not a technology, it was an idea. And the same is for the cloud. The cloud is not a technology. The cloud is just a couple of things combined as one idea. And maybe the technology itself even is not new, but the same is true, for example, for YouTube. Putting a video on the internet is nothing new, but the way how they did it changed everything. Smartphones. We have seen smartphones for years, and it never was a big topic until Apple came in and it was a real game changer. So it's how you do things and not what technologies you use.
We have already seen that hackers actually, they use stolen credit card to buy hundreds of computers to use that to crack passwords, for example, denial of service attacks and so on. It's just a way that they can obtain more resources.
GPUs or processors?
Well, it's just more resources. You imagine that I compromise this university. I don't know how many computers they have on this university. The same thing. It's just this is an internal cloud on this lab in here. You know, I can use the same computer power here as that I can use in the cloud.
Just like that, the security thing is something that I hear very often when I speak with people about the cloud, and they say they would not trust, or companies say they would not trust the data to the cloud. And I would say at the end of the day, it's just a matter of how much money do you have. Because if you're a small company, like 5 people, 10 people working in your company, and you're having your server in the corner of your room, and someone just needs to go through the window, steal your server, and have all the data, then I would say for sure it would be more secure if you host your data not in the server, but if you host your data at Amazon, because they really look at their windows, they have their stuff at earthquake-proof places, and they really have much more money than the smaller company. On the other side, of course, if you're a real large, controlling a real large enterprise, and if you're having millions of dollars to put on security and on your hardware, then maybe it's safer for you not to go to the cloud, but to have it locally. But it really depends on how big you are.
This is where the standardization should come in. At the moment, there are no governance, or there is no standard as what are the minimum requirements of a cloud organization. As we discussed, there are only a handful of them. Amazon is probably the front runner in there. And if you have those standards in place, then hopefully there won't be any issues.
Well, you do have some standards, but the same standards that you have today. For example, the PCI standard on how you can handle credit card information. I mean, if you have some kind of resource in the cloud that handles credit card information, it's the same standard that you have today. But I do agree with the panel that we need some kind of standard, but I think we need several standards depending on what kind of cloud provider you are.
Yeah, I can add the SAS 70 standard applicable to data center itself, like the infrastructure or identifier systems, power systems, so on and so forth, but not into the services that you have hosted.
And it's probably also worth noting, talking about different standards for different types of provider, and it's also relevant to think that the organisations that are potentially putting their data out there might be under different obligations for protecting the different types of data that they're putting out there. So for their data retention requirements, the level of protection that they're obliged to provide for different types of personal information, medical information you can imagine, financial data, and so it's a consideration for the individual organisations themselves as well as the providers and the different standards they might need to adhere to.
That's a tricky thing, because of course encrypting data always costs some time and money, and I know that, for example, Amazon does not encrypt the data. What they do is they split it on so many machines that they say that even for them, it will be almost impossible to glue together the whole picture. And their approach is that they say if you really want to have encryption, then you have to apply encryption to your own cloud machines. But of course, it's like, well, the encryption, if you encrypt your machine, the encryption key needs to be stored somewhere, so still I would say it might be possible if you're really determined and have control over Amazon to find out the key.
It all depends what you mean by policymakers. The policymakers, cloud at the moment is a commercial environment. It's not Kaspersky, it's not any other organizations. Okay? And they are creating their own infrastructure to make sure that they have a business to run. Because they realize that if they don't have a secure environment, they have no business, so they can't do anything. So, in a way, they are only governing themselves, which is not bad. In a way, there are standards out there, government standard, information security standards that they're following, and they are making sure that it's there. However, the wider it becomes, because very soon we'll have many other cloud providers like Amazon's of this world, then you need to look at and come up with policies to make sure that there is a uniform, there is a governance across all those agencies.
It's also a question of how much will people care, because if you talk to experts, and especially to IT people, of course they are skeptical, and so if I would have the choice between storing my personal data on my local machine or put it to the cloud, I would never put it to the cloud. Not unless it will be encrypted using very strong algorithm. So, but this is me. But if you talk to average users, they don't even care about if their Facebook connection is SSL encrypted or not. And they just assume that everything will be right. So even if it's wrong, maybe from a privacy perspective, it still can be successful. And I still remember when Microsoft started to force people to register the Windows installation. Everyone at that time, especially in Germany, was completely upset and said, no, this is impossible. Microsoft is trying to spy on us. And nowadays, everyone just accepts it, and people are using all kind of cloud solutions where much more personal data is transmitted than this user is now using Windows XP.
Office 2010 is actually on the cloud anyway.
It's an interesting thing that first we speak about distributional technology, distribution calculations concerning the cloud, and now speak about centralized information. It's the opposite concepts. And I think the argument of personal information, I will never put it in cloud, means that we could, it's main argument for personal information system, personal clouds. And I think the cloud is, future will be not absolute term, it will be a relative term. We will speak about cloudness. It's like operator, let's increase cloudness, let's decrease cloudness. And about, and it's really an interesting idea, because if we have intellectual house, intelligence house, we need to distribute our information, personal information, with a huge devices and gadgets which have everyone. And we, of course, will have personal cloud. And I think in mathematics to understand what the future of function, if it can say so, we try to imagine one day when no new web service will appear. Can you imagine this day? What will happen then? When we will have the map of web services, we understand that we need to only to control these web services and no new web services. And when we change the concept, and that's why I don't believe in cloud future, because someday we will have all necessary web services. Today we will have a lot of new services, but if you look at social networks, other social services, you can see that a lot of services you don't need at all, and you will use in future. And that's why we need only a strict set of web services.
You asked for availability. From my point of view, the main difference between all the client-server architecture and current cloud architecture is availability. Because 20 years ago you have to duplicate your servers, you have to put all of the servers in different number of data centers. Currently, you just organize a new service, and provider of cloud infrastructure takes care about availability. If we look at Azure, Microsoft Azure, Microsoft guarantee that your service will be available for 99.999, something like that, because they take care that they migrate your data between not only servers but data centers, and you have to put your data around the globe. So in any disaster somewhere in the world, you've got the copies of your software, of your servers in any part of the world, and you will be definitely available for your customers. That's So I think availability is not a problem for current, well-designed current services.
I don't actually think that piracy is a problem in the cloud because it costs, you know, such a small amount of money that you don't really care about downloading that thing. Are you familiar with Spotify? Do you know what that is? Spotify? And Vodler, do you know what that is? And Netflix? You know, that more or less eliminated piracy in Sweden. Spotify, you pay 10 euros, you get unlimited access to music, whatever you want, and you can store the music locally on both your phone and your computer. Vodler is the same thing, but for movies. You pay a small amount of money, and you get access to I don't know how many thousand movies. Same thing with Netflix in the US. So that more or less eliminated piracy in Sweden. And if we have the same thing with applications in the cloud, then you wouldn't really care about downloading that software. We see the same thing in the app stores right now, that it costs, you know, just a penny to get some application. It's not worth trying to find a legit copy on the internet. You just pay the money and get done with it.
You mentioned about denial of service. I mean, to do that against an infrastructure, you know, cloud-based, I mean, based on what was said before, it's the scale of that operation, you wouldn't be able to take down the whole thing. But, you know, okay, attacking somebody's service there, the potential problem is that the cloud itself can scale the provision for you so that you've got more facility, more resource released to you so that your operation can continue, but then actually you end up getting charged for it. It's the concept of economic denial of service. So, you know, the attack occurs, you require more resources given to you, and you're charged. And that's a potential risk there. Or, okay, if you restrict the volume, your service runs out and denial of service actually does occur. But just to pick up that point earlier about the availability aspect, I mean, one of the things that people in surveys are flagging up as one of their main concerns is the potential loss of control of their data, etc. But I think that's also one of the biggest advantages, that they don't have to think about controlling the infrastructure. That aspect of the availability and the management of it is, generally speaking, likely to be better handled within this large infrastructure than a number of individual organisations trying to do it for themselves.
Okay, thank you very much, panelists, for a very interesting conversation about the cloud. Please be on time, about 12 o'clock.